This video file is recorded in Sabancı University during the recitations for the CS201 Introduction to Computing course, as it was given in the fall 2016 semester.
So this is called select sort. Okay, this should be enough. So we know what are structures. Just a brief review about the vector class and about sorting. I give you the algorithm, okay? So again, we start from the 0th index, we find the minimum, we put it there. We start from the first index, in the remaining sublist, in the remaining subvector, we find the minimum, we put it in its corresponding place. Again, we find the minimum, we put it there, up until we go to the end, okay? This is one of the ways to sort a list. Of course, there are other algorithms. Maybe you can come up with your own, and I would appreciate it if you come up with your own. And if you're going to take the algorithms course like 2 years from now, it's usually given in the 3rd or 4th year, you will deal a lot of the sorting problem because it's really an important one. Okay, so you saw what we should do. Again, you should give the name, you enter the file name, where you have names and surnames of the students. You assign unique numbers to the students, and then you print them in accordance to the ID, their unique ID, sorted by their unique ID. And this is the list for the ones that just came. You see that Craig Hell is something where is Craig Hell is here, but since his ID is 10 and it's randomly assigned and it's unique, this is important. So we sort them by the ID. Since his ID is the smallest, he's in the first spot. Then we have Naomi Watts. Where is Naomi here? She's in the first spot there in the student list, but here she's second, and so on. Now let's see how are we going to do this stuff. So it's not hard to guess that we are dealing with which example? Student ID. Okay. Copy paste everything from the student ID, send it to the solution folder, and let's continue. Just remove the previous file and add the newly copy pasted files. So we will need the random generator library for generating random numbers for the ID. And this is our program. Okay, very briefly. Here we define a structure called student ID. Inside we have the name. Basically, it should be name and surname. Both of them are there. And unsigned integer called ID. We have it unsigned because the ID cannot be a negative number. Okay, I mean, theoretically it can be, but usually it's a positive number. That's why it's unsigned. So what are we going to do in this program is the following. I suppose I can erase some parts of that, or it's not necessary to do so. I just can do something like this. We're going to have an array like this. And so we have indexes 0, 1, 2, and so on. The name of the array is going to be called in main. Let's see what's the name of the array in main. Just list, I suppose. Yeah. It's going to be a list. Its name is going to be list. So this is list. Okay, this is the list. And here we have something like this. Instead of having ordinary data, not complex data, simple data like integer, character, string, we're going to have a structure as an element as a type for the array. And the structure that we're dealing here, as you saw it already, the structure is called student ID. It has a string name and an ID. So we are going to have an ID, which is of type integer, and name. Here you have the name and the surname of the students. So this is index 0. Index 1 has also another data, another variable of type student ID. And inside student ID, of course, you have the ID and the name of the students. Okay, this is 0 index, 2 index number 2, and so on, up until the end. Okay, so this is, let's say if the size of the array is size, then we have size minus 1. So what I'm trying to tell you is that the type, the data type of the array is student ID. Previously we had characters, like here, everything was character. We had integers, but here we have a student ID, and I'm going to write it here. So the structure is called, the name of the structure is student ID, and it has a string which is called name, and an integer, unsigned integer, called ID. Okay, so if I want to define one variable of the class of the structure student ID, I do something like this: student ID S1, let's say. If I want to access the name, I just write S1 name, since everything is public here. If I want to access the ID, I just write S1 point ID. S1 point name, S1 point ID. Now, can you tell me if I want to access, let's say this is not the 0th index, I'm talking about the first index. The ID is, let's say, 173, and the name of the student is rtrim. It's a string. How can I access the ID of this guy? Having in mind that the name of the list is list, and I want to access this ID of the first index. What I should do first? And you saw that if I have a variable of type student ID, this is how I access the data, the members of that structure. Any idea? First, in order to access ID, we should access this structure here. Okay, this data here. How do I access this one? Come on, everything is on the board. So this is a vector. We have operations in the vector. How do I access this box here, this cell? Any idea? Only this one. Yeah, in brackets. So the name of, exactly. I mean, it's so simple. Let me write it here. So, I'm trying to access this guy here. The name of the vector is list, so I'm doing like this, list of 1. That means that I'm here. Now, if I want to access the ID of list of 1, what should I do? Just make a comparison with this stuff here. So S1 is of type student ID, okay? And if I want to access the ID of S1, S1 point ID, and access the ID of S1. Now list 1 is also student ID. Everything is student ID. So the type here of the vector is student ID, which was the structure we defined. So how can I access the ID? List 1 is this guy here. Point ID. This is how I access the list, okay? So the result of this guy will be 173. If I do something like this, list 1 point name. I'm writing it as a comment, so it will be rtrim as a string. This was important to know. And if you remember the sorting stuff, how we did the sorting, that it should be easy to understand the code. I'll need like 5 more minutes to explain it to you, and you can have the break. So, let's go with the student ID again. This is the structure. We defined a function which is called swap. Why do we need this function called swap? Because, as you remember here in the array, during the first iteration, we found, okay, the minimum is 1, so we should exchange 3 and 1. When we exchange those values, this is called swap, and we need the function for this, okay, which is called swap. Then we should exchange 7 and 2 here, so we call it the function swap. What the swap is doing is the following. It takes 2 parameters, S1 and S2. Basically, we should sort this vector in accordance to the ID of the students. And when we sort them, we want to see the changes in the main function, or the function that has called that particular function. That's why we send them as parameters. How it's working, let's say this is student S1, and this is student S2. And of course, we have the ID here, the name. Okay, ID here, the name. And what we want to do is to exchange the places of those two guys. Okay? What we do is the following. We define another variable which is called temp. It's also of student's ID type of this structure. So we have ID here, we have the name. We put the content of S1 here. So let's say if the ID of this guy is 3 and the name is, let's say, A. The ID of this guy is 5 and the name is, let's say, B. So we put S1 to temp. So we have ID 3 and name A. Okay? Then we put S2 to S1. So ID is going to become 5. Name is going to become B. And we put temp to S2. So ID is going to be 3, name is going to be A. Basically, they swap their places, okay? The values were exchanged. This function is doing exactly this one. And it's always like this for all types. Integers, characters, strings, whatever. This is it. You will use the function swap very often. Okay, now we are dealing with this select sort. I'm not going to engage in details with this function, but the select sort basically is doing the thing that I told to you. I start from 0 up to size -1, and so this is the red arrow. You remember that red arrow that I wrote? This is the for loop for the red arrow. This is the for loop for the black arrow I told you in board while explaining select sort. For each index starting from 0 up until the end, we find the minimum of that pass, of that iteration, and in the end we change the minimum with the index. So if you remember the vector that I just showed you, maybe we can record this. So 3 was exchanged with 1, okay? This is done with the swap function in the end. Then 7 was changed with 2, because the minimum of the first iteration was 1. We find 1, we exchange it with 3. Then we start with the second iteration. We go until the end. We find the minimum of the subarray that is left. We put it in the corresponding place using the swap function, and so on, okay? So this is done with this piece of code. So again, this function takes a reference of a vector and its size, and it sorts it. With this for loop, again, we are doing the red arrow stuff. Okay, this for loop here is the black arrow stuff. So for the first pass, let's say we start with 0. We find the minimum for the 0th index, and in the end we swap it. J is the 0th index. We swap it. So for the first iteration, for the first pass, we know that in the 0th index we have the minimum. Then J is incremented. We go to the first index. We find here the minimum for the first index, and that is swapped with the jth index. Okay, minimum and J. And we do the following thing for the end, up until the end of the array. Okay, this is the select sort. So here we sort the list in accordance to, this is important, in accordance to the ID. Okay, because as you see here, each element, each cell is of student ID. We have the name and the ID, but we want to sort the list in accordance to the ID of the students. That's why we use here A of k, point ID. If this is smaller than a minimum of ID, then the minimum is the index we were talking about. Do you understand this piece of code? Should I go in more details or not? If you think that I should go in details about this stuff, tell me. Yes or no? I mean, if you understood select sort, this is how it works. Just we are sorting in accordance to the ID, nothing else. Okay, if you have any problems or if you think that we should explain it, just tell me during the break, I can do it. No problem. Then we have a function which is called unique ID. Because we randomly assign the vector, the IDs for each student, and we want to be sure that it's unique. If an ID is already assigned to a student, this guy returns false. So what we are doing is the following. We take the student, the vector as a parameter, and an ID as a parameter, and we want to check whether this ID as a parameter that we have sent as a parameter appears in some of the IDs of this vector. Okay, so we start from 0 up until the end. If it appears somewhere, we return false, meaning that that ID is not unique. A certain student has it. Basically, it's something like this. Let's say this student has an ID of 15, and I want to be sure whether or 173 is there. So I'm checking. 15 is not equal to 173. Then I go check the second ID. 173 is not equal to 100, is equal to 173, meaning that I have this ID, I cannot assign it, and I return false. If I check all the IDs up until the end, and I don't find it, that means that that ID is, that I have sent as a parameter is unique, and I return true, meaning I can use it for a student. Then we have the function which is called insert ID. This is also an important function. So, you see how do we declare a vector? Always dynamic vector. We use this name, vector. We write the type here. The type is student ID. The name is list. So, but this is a parameter, okay? So here we send a reference of a vector of type of a student ID type, an ID as an integer, and name. What we want to do is the following. We want to add a new element in the vector. Basically, how do we do that? We declare a new student ID called stu. The ID of the newly created variable ID stu.id is ID. This ID that we have sent as parameter. The name is this name here, but pay attention. This ID and name. So this name and this name are not the same. That's why you see those in gray, meaning these are the references, the parameters that we have sent. So we make a new box of type student ID. We set the ID of that new box to be this ID. We set the name of that box to be name. Okay, basically those two. or those two. And in the end, we use the pushback function. List point pushback, the student is pushed back, meaning we put it in the end. So if I create an ID, let's say with ID 32, the name is, let's say, Edge. If I put it here, I push it back in the end, meaning I put it in the end, okay? And the size is incremented by 1, but it's done automatically. This is the pushback function. I print the list, we should do it here. I mean, it's trivial how we can do it. How we are going to print the vector. Very, in the same manner as we already did. We start from 0. We go up until list size. Because this is a dynamic array, so we have the size property here defined. And we print it. But the way we print it is the following. Now this is the important part. So, student, txt. This is the format how we should print it. We print ID, then name. That's why let's do it together. So initially, we should do this one. Cout, ID. This is tabular value for the tab. And we print the name. New line. So we are done with this line here. ID name. Now we print first the ID of the student, then the name. ID here, then the name. It's done like this. Cout list of I point ID. Then you see here we have an empty space, which is a tab. And this is how we write the tab. Of course, you can do it with multiple empty spaces. Then we print the name. So list of I point name. And you go to a new line. This should be it. Finally, we go to the main function. In the main function, we define a new ifstream. We declare a new input file stream variable, strings, file name, and line, and a random number generator. We declare a new vector, which is of type student ID of the structure. The name of the vector is called list. We prompt for the file name to be given. So this is enter file name. We read the file name. We open it. If we cannot open it, we just print a proper message, and we finish with the program. If we can open it, then, so basically if we can open this file, then we take those one line by line, which are names and surnames of students. So we take them line by line. Here we define an ID, and what we do, we assign here a random ID between 10 and 99. But we check whether the newly assigned ID is a unique one. If it's not a unique one, this loop is repeated again and again and again, up until we come out with a unique ID, okay? So if the ID that I've randomly assigned is not unique, then we repeat the loop again and again up until it's unique. This unique ID is the function unique ID that we already saw. Then we have the insert ID function. So if we have found a unique ID, we are sure that we have found a unique ID because we are out of the loop, then we call the insert ID function, which this one here, insert ID, you remember this one, with the pushback function. And this insert ID function pushes a new student in the end. But as you can see here, students are sorted in accordance to the student ID. That's why we call the select sort function, this one here, which sorts the list. And finally, we print the list. Namely, we use the function that we wrote together here. Okay? This is it. So this was the output that we were looking for. Okay, I didn't use system pause, that's why it's... Is this clear? I mean, if you understood this, you understood quite a lot of things. So something similar will be part of your assignment. It's already assigned. So this is what we do. Now, honestly, how many of you did understand this example? Okay, if that's the case, very nice. Then you deserve a pause of 5 minutes. We'll be back.